Europe is falling apart. France is protesting. They just got a new prime minister today, and they already don't like him. The Dutch had a coalition government collapse, and then they had the caretaker government also collapse. And in Germany, no leader or party really has much support from anyone. Yet one of our longest-standing, most often repeated forecasts is that a strong leader will soon rise in Germany and dominate all of Europe. Why? Let's look at that on today's Trumpet World. So often on this show, I'm talking about the rise of a strong German leader. And that's something that would have a massive effect. Imagine a 21st century superpower with more nuclear weapons and a larger economy than China's, a land area bigger than Canada, more exports than anyone else in the world. Such a power would rival the United States, would rival China, and any other world power. Well, the European Union could be that power. It has just about all the components of being a global superpower except one. It's the world's second largest economy. It's the center for global trade. It accounts for 15% of the world's military spending. It has the world's second highest defense budget. Foreign Policy wrote a few years ago that by most objective measures, Europe either rivals or surpasses the United States and China in its ability to project a full spectrum of global military, economic, and soft power. Europe has a lot of ability, but it's not using it. Why? Well, because of that one crucial missing component. Instead of exercising global dominance, it's been lurching from crisis to crisis. More and more other powers don't take Europe seriously. I've seen more and more commentators that want a federal European superstate lamenting that Europe's future is just as a colossal museum. But what if Europe locks in that final crucial component? What if the EU gets leadership? I mean, right now, European leadership is a joke. It has between 3 and 5 presidents, depending on how you count them, and none of them have that much real power. Despite the EU's best efforts, nations retain a lot of their sovereignty, and Europeans themselves see the problem. In 2012, you had the so-called Berlin Group, a group of 10 of the EU's core nations, called for an EU super-president, formed by merging many of the top jobs. In his September 2017 State of the Union speech, then Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker made almost exactly the same proposal. Europe would be easier to understand if one captain was steering the ship, he said. But not much has changed since then. Now, we focused particularly on Germany for providing that leadership. And for a long time, Germany has been the de facto, at least most important politician in Europe. You know, Henry Kissinger had that famous quip about who do I call when I want to call Europe? And for some time now, the answer to that question has been, well, you call the German Chancellor. A strong German leader would easily be a strong European leader. But Germany kind of lacks that leader. Friedrich Merz, I think, has a lot more strength than his predecessor, Schulz, and even than Merkel. But he is not the European super president. The rise of this strong German leader is one of our most often repeated forecasts. It's so central to what we say about Europe, I find myself coming back to it again and again and again when we have our Trumpet Week in Review shows. So again, why? Throughout its 52-year history of The Plain Truth, its editor-in-chief, Herbert W. Armstrong, pointed to the rise of this European Federation and this rise of this strongman. And we are a continuation of his work. Mr. Armstrong was forecasting the rise of this European superstate, a union of 10 nations led by a super president, let's call him, to use the Berlin Group's words. But he was forecasting that before World War II, when Germany lay defeated and crushed. After World War II, he continued to forecast the rise of a German-led European superpower. Right up to his final sermon delivered in late 1985, Mr. Armstrong continued to powerfully prophesy about these events. And the union that he talked about is pretty much here. It just needs the leader. The November-December 1954 Plain Truth, for example, talked about the way that Europe had been destroyed, Germany crushed after World War II, And now, a short 9 years later, behold the spectacle of Washington and London making every possible diplomatic effort, backed by American dollars, to do two things: create a United States of Europe and to rearm Germany. It said Germany inevitably will emerge as the leader of a united Europe. And that's where we are now. It went on to say it will require some spiritual binding force to inspire the confidence to remove these fears. And that spiritual binding force must arise from inside Europe. All Europe is actually ready, just waiting for the confidence-inspiring leader. And that's pretty much where we are now. In the Good News magazine of 1953, Mr. Armstrong wrote, "It's probable that none but a German can provide the dynamic, inspired leadership required to organize such a political military federation." In 1950, he wrote about European nations becoming, quote, distrustful of America and thinking more and more about uniting themselves into a United States of Europe. And then to do that, he wrote they needed a new supreme leader, the successor of Adolf Hitler, to rise up and assert himself and take command. And then even in the final year of his life, in 1985, he was writing, "There is yet another leader to arise in Europe." I mean, we see much of this already. We see Europe distrustful of America and thinking more and more about uniting themselves into a United States of Europe. And then Trumpet Editor-in-Chief Gerald Flurry continued the same warning. The very first year that the Trumpet magazine was established, in 1991, he wrote, "If a real crisis develops, will the Germans call for a new Führer? Your Bible says that is going to happen. That crisis will probably be triggered by an economic collapse in the US." I mean, he's repeated this many, many times, this forecast. Here's a compilation of some of the times Mr. Flurry has made this forecast.
He's not going to come in by, let's say, a democratic process. He's going to come in and use flatteries and sort of tweak the democratic process. It says here something like that, and perhaps take advantage of a weak coalition. But he's going to come in by flatteries. So God sees him, well, not the same way the people see him, but he actually gains that power, hijacks that European superpower by flatteries. He apparently puts together some kind of a small coalition, and that's how he moves into power. I mean, he is unusually adept at flattery. You have to be very intelligent to be able to deceive people in high places with flattery. And he does it magnificently. He was never voted into the office, but he came in, got control of all that power through deceit and flatteries. Now remember, this is an end-time book, and this is an end-time prophecy. It's going to happen again in this end time. A man is going to come, and through deceit and flatteries is going to get control of the Holy Roman Empire and its 10 toes, or 10 kings, and not by voting. Even though that is their system today, it is not going to, he's going to come in another way.
Why would Mr. Flurry and Mr. Armstrong continually make this forecast for decades? Why would they consider it so important? These events, this strong leader, is a critical part of end-time Bible prophecy. Many of these forecasts are found in passages of the Bible with prophecies that span a number of years. And we can see the beginning parts of those prophecies clearly fulfilled already. We can match the Bible with history books and see where these prophecies in part have already been proven true. So let's look at what the Bible says about this coming German leader and prove from the Bible why we're expecting this man on the scene very soon. Now, Daniel chapters 8 and 11 are full of prophecy that God gave about 500 years before Jesus Christ was born. Some of this prophecy has now become history. A great king of Grecia attacked Persia, just as Daniel 8 verses 20 to 21 foretold. His name was Alexander the Great. You might have heard of him. But a lot of what Daniel wrote in these chapters is for the time of the end, as it says in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 17 and 11 and verse 40. And so let's look at Daniel 8. Daniel 8 and verse 23 says, "And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full." So latter time, this could mean utmost part. This is referring to the last days, really, of man ruling over man. A king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Verse 25 says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. This man is going to be on the scene when Jesus Christ returns. That's what makes him such an important figure. And if we look over in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40, we have what is very clearly a parallel prophecy. Verse 40 begins, and at the time of the end, so it establishes it's the same time period, and it goes on to describe a king of the north. And verse 45 describes this leader, and it says, and he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Again, he meets his end, just like this strongman of Daniel chapter 8. These are both describing the same man, and already we can get a bit of an idea of where this strongman rules. Remember, the master key for understanding Bible prophecy is the identity of modern Israel. And I gave a program all about that just a few weeks ago, and proving and just going through Mr. Armstrong's book, The United States and Britain in Prophecy, that really comprehensively proves that Britain and America are descended from the lost tribes of Israel. And you have all of these prophecies in the Old Testament that describe a nation of size and power much greater than Israel in the Middle East. One of the world's great powers with tens of millions, hundreds of millions of inhabitants. And that's clearly not fulfilled in Israel in the Middle East. If they are the sum total of Israel, then, well, there are parts of your Bible that are just wrong. And Mr. Armstrong proved from the Bible that Britain and America are descended from the northern tribes of Israel that were taken into captivity and lost from view from the rest of the world. So when we've got that understanding, we can know, well, this strong man, he doesn't come from Israel. He doesn't come from Britain or America. Other prophecies that we'll look at later show him attacking and defeating Israel. We can see here as well, he doesn't come from the king of the south. He doesn't come from the Middle East. And we've had a show all about, well, who is the king of the south? He's not from Egypt. He's not from Ethiopia and Libya. They're mentioned here. It talks about tidings out of the east and out of the north, troubling this leader. What's east and north of Jerusalem? Well, that's referring to Russia and China and Asia. He doesn't come from Asia. And that doesn't leave you that many other options. Only one of the few major world powers that's not America, that's not in Asia. Well, it's talking about Europe. And Daniel 11 shows that this king of the north is a modern-day successor to the Roman Empire, or the Holy Roman Empire. And we can look, and we will look, at a whole range of different scriptures, and they fit together perfectly. Mr. Armstrong would compare the Bible to a jigsaw puzzle, and I guess if you think about a jigsaw puzzle, sometimes you can have two pieces, and you can kind of sort of convince yourself that they fit together. But when you have the broad context in view, and you see the whole puzzle, and you see how each bit fits in context with other bits, sometimes you realize, oh, those two pieces that I thought were connected, they don't have anything to do with each other. And the same is true with the Bible. Sometimes we can zoom in on one or two things and we can convince ourselves they're connected. But then we see the big picture, we see the overview, and actually it's clear. I got this wrong. I put this in the wrong place. And so we'll look at this overview. We'll look at many of these different scriptures. Some of these are found in Isaiah chapter 10. And when you look at the whole jigsaw puzzle in all its context, you realize and you see how every little bit fits perfectly together. This piece doesn't just connect with this one other piece, it connects with this bit and this bit. And you see how all of these scriptures, written in some cases thousands of years apart, perfectly complement each other and build off each other. So Isaiah chapter 10 and verses 5 to 19 basically give a similar prophecy. It begins by saying, O Assyrian, the rod of my anger, the staff of their hand is my indignation. It describes this strong conqueror. And then it describes God defeating him. Verse 16, therefore shall the Lord of hosts, send among him his fat ones, and under his glory he shall kindle a burning like the burning of a fire. It talks about him being consumed. So it describes a lot of the same things as Daniel, But this passage adds that the leader will be the king of Assyria. This helps us identify him. Assyria refers to the ancestors of modern Germany. And again, we have a reprint article, The Remarkable Identity of the German People, and we'll probably do a show just on that subject before too long as well. And Isaiah 10 is partly history, partly refers to Assyria's ancient attack on Jerusalem in the days of King Hezekiah. But a lot of the details in Isaiah's prophecy weren't fulfilled then, and so it refers more specifically about this end-time fierce king. And here you'll notice in all of these different places he's called a king. In his booklet, A Strong German Leader is Imminent, Mr. Flurry wrote, the soon-coming ruler could literally be called a king. Even if he is not, the Bible gives him that label. When the Bible talks about a king, in most cases, he's saying this is not a democratic government. Even if he doesn't have that title, he is going to lead like a king. This vision in Daniel shows that the European Empire is about to become a lot more authoritative. And I think you could add a lot more authoritarian. This implies a pretty big change for Europe. Europe is democratic, at least on the surface. The European Union is designed to be a club of democracies. How could you have an autocratic leader dominate sophisticated modern Europe? If a fierce king is going to take power, he's going to have to do it at a time when European democracy is in crisis. Well, Daniel chapter 11 also tells us how that happens. And this is in Daniel 11, verses 21 to 23. Now, if you look this up in many Bible commentaries, it will tell you correctly that this is referring to Antiochus Epiphanes, a king who reigned in the Seleucid kingdom, basically in modern Syria, in 175 to 164 BC. And these scriptures prophesy exactly what Antiochus would end up doing. They were written many years in advance of that by Daniel. And, verse 31 talks about this, says that this Antiochus would pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and shall place the abomination that makes desolate. And remember that phrase, the abomination that makes desolate. And Antiochus, he infamously assaulted and slaughtered the Jews. He attacked the Jewish religion. He tried to stamp out Jewish worship at the temple, and he set up a pagan statue to Jupiter Olympus in front of the altar. Is this passage in Daniel 11 purely history? Well, let's look at Matthew 24. And see what Jesus Christ himself says. And I think this is a critical passage to understanding all of this. Matthew 24 and verse 15, Jesus Christ said, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, so we just read that, stand in the holy place, whoso reads, let him understand, then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Now, you go to a lot of churches in this world, and they're not talking about Daniel chapter 11. And Antiochus Epiphanes in the abomination of desolation. Well, why not? Jesus Christ did. He said, we need to understand this. We need to thoroughly consider it. We only have a small fraction of the words of Jesus Christ recorded for us. The Bible curates the most important bits. And here, this is a sermon shortly before he's crucified, and he's talking about Daniel chapter 11 and Bible prophecy. If we're going to follow Jesus Christ, well, we need to be talking about Daniel chapter 11 and Bible prophecy. It doesn't matter what most churches do. Jesus Christ talked about this. And if this prophecy was fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes about 200 years or nearly 200 years before Christ, why is Jesus Christ talking about this as a future event? Why is he telling his disciples, well, watch for this to happen in the future? Why preserve these words for us 2,000 years later? Well, this prophecy had an ancient fulfillment, but it's got a modern fulfillment as well. It referred to Antiochus Epiphanes, but there's another strong leader that Antiochus was just a type of. And we could call him a modern Antiochus, a new Antiochus, a soon-coming Antiochus. Like many prophecies, this is dual. It refers to both. And Daniel chapter 11 and verse 21 tells us how this modern Antiochus will come to power. It says, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Now, he's not going to come in by the normal route. You look at what the Hebrew means and what the commentaries are saying. Barnes' note says, in other words, it should not be conferred on him by the law or act of the nation or in any regular succession or claim. It's not a typical way that leaders come to power. And this is exactly why Mr. Flurry has talked about an inconclusive German election, coalition negotiations, going back 15, 20 years, and saying, well, watch for Germany to have a weak government structure. Watch for Germany to have messy coalitions. It's going to pave the way for this strongman, and he's going to use that to come to power. And we see a Germany stuck with no democratic way out. Germany's coalition structures become worse and worse. Like the votes fragment more evenly between different parties every time Germany has an election. They haven't found the way out of this. We're on the path to this strong leader coming to power. And we can read more in other scriptures about what this strong leader is going to do once he comes to power. Daniel chapter 7, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17, they're critical to understanding this. And they describe a series of beasts. And the Bible, we can let the Bible interpret itself. It tells us that these beasts refer to kingdoms. For example, Daniel 7 and verse 23 says, thus the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, and he shall be diverse or different from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth and tread it down and break it in pieces. So the fourth beast, it's the fourth kingdom. And then verse 24 says, and the 10 horns of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. So, this is all consistent with it being a kingdom. And the Bible often refers to kingdoms by the king who leads it. We just read in Daniel 7 and verse 23, the fourth kingdom. These beasts are 4 kingdoms. If we go to Daniel 7 and verse 17, it says, the great beasts which are 4 kings. And so the Bible uses king and kingdom interchangeably. And the same is true for the book of Revelation. When it describes a beast, it's generally referring to a major power, an empire. But there are times where the Bible refers to a beast referring to the king of that kingdom, the ruler of that empire. Revelation 16 and verse 13, for example, describes unclean spirits coming out of, this individual's mouth. And so Mr. Armstrong wrote, the beast, according to the Bible, is the political leader of the Babylonish system, pictured in Daniel 7, Revelation 13 and 17. The beast can refer to the kingdom or to the king. And he said the beast is yet to appear in Europe for a final revival of fascism to head the last rebirth of the Roman Empire, a United States of Europe that will startle this world. And so we can learn a lot more about this coming beast with that understanding in mind. Right? Revelation 17 and verse 12 talks about 10 other kings that it says have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So this king rules over a group of 10 nations. There are 10 junior kings under him. These 10 have one mind and shall give their strength and power to the beast. It says that in verse 13. And it was prophecies like this that led Mr. Armstrong to forecast that the European economic community, as it was in his day, would eventually shrink down to 10 nations or group of nations, all led by one individual. And we see Europe always talking about shrinking down so that they can act more efficiently. And here's just one soundbite I found quickly from Mr. Armstrong talking about this, and he talked about this a lot.
Now that's what we're expecting next over here in Europe, is that there will be a union of 10 nations going together in Europe, and the Pope at Rome will sit on top of the whole heap. There will be one man over all the governments. There will be a king, or I don't know what they may call him, a president, a prime minister, whatever term they give him, I don't know, over each one of the 10 nations.
Revelation 17 and other passages add another important dimension to this. It describes this beast power as being led by a, quote, great whore. In the Bible, a woman represents a church. We see that in Ephesians 5 and 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 2. This great beast is led by a great false church. And that's why when the Bible refers to the individual man as the beast, it often mentions a false prophet alongside him. We can see that in Revelation 16 and verse 30, 19 and verse 20, 20 and Revelation 20 and verse 10. This fits hand in glove with Daniel chapter 11, a book written hundreds of years ahead of the book of Revelation that describes this great leader setting up camp in Jerusalem, having this conflict around Jerusalem. there's not a political reason for setting up your headquarters in Jerusalem. Clearly, there's a major religious component to this empire. Religion is very important to it. Ezekiel 23 is another passage that attests to the religious nature of this beast. It talks about modern Assyria in verse 9, but it uses the term interchangeably with Babylonians and Chaldeans. You see this especially in verses 14 to 18 of Ezekiel 23. And you can go all the way back to Genesis chapter 10. And you can see Ashur, the father of the Assyrians, working closely in this region of ancient Babylon with the Babylonians and the Chaldeans. Anciently, these kingdoms lived side by side, but the Assyrians kind of borrowed a lot of their religion from the Babylonians. Babylon and the Babylonian religion was sacred to Assyria to a certain extent. Isaiah 23 and verse 13 specifically prophesies of these two powers working together in the end time. And they did this in World War II. Italy will be one of the 10 kings. And the religion based in Italy, and Italy is the Babylonians or the Chaldeans, and we've got material that we can send you on that. Because their religion will be the religion of the whole empire, the Bible also refers to this empire as Babylon or as Chaldea. Habakkuk 1 and verse 6 uses that term. God says, I'll raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation. Very similar language to Isaiah 10 and verse 5 when God says, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, the staff in their hand is my indignation. They're interchangeable titles for the empire God is going to use, the combined political and religious empire God is going to use to correct his people. And Habakkuk continues to tell us more about this coming strongman. We have to go here a little, there a little, to put together all this biblical truth. Verse 11 says, Then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing this his power unto his God. He imputes his war-making power, his victories, to his God, his false God, Satan the devil. Isaiah 10 describes the same transformation. Verse 7 says, Howbeit he means not so, neither does his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. Mr. Flurry wrote, An evil spirit power will seize hold of the new German leader and cause him to do horrible things that he never imagined. And so Satan the devil, through this man, inflicts massive suffering on the world. Habakkuk 1 and verse 8 says that this empire is more fierce than the evening wolves. Verse 9 says it shall come all for violence. Mr. Flurry writes, There is much power, but it comes from Satan. This man will think it is from God. Satan will gain control of these two leaders, the political and the religious, and cause the worst time of horror and suffering in human history. The devil hates Israel and God's church and intends to do violence. He has no compassion or mercy. So through this strong leader, Satan the devil will bring about the worst suffering in human history. But as we've already started to see, all of these prophecies have another detail in common. They show that this strongman will wreak all of his destruction just before the greatest event ever in human history, the return of Jesus Christ to this earth. Jesus Christ himself said that in Matthew 24. And again, you don't hear churches talking about this. That leads some people to think, well, getting into Bible prophecy is strange or unusual. I know Jesus Christ did it. Jesus Christ talked about this. If we're going to be following him, we need to be talking about this. And he said in Matthew 24 and verse 33, So likewise you, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. He's talking about his return. He told his disciples to watch for it. And he said, well, this strong man and this abomination of desolation, this is an important part of watching for it. Watch for that to happen. And you can know that Christ's return is near. As we've seen already, Daniel 8 and verse 25 says that this man will stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Daniel 11 and verse 45, he shall come to his end and none shall help him. Revelation 19 and verse 9 talks about this man gathering his armies to fight Christ and lose and be cast into a burning lake of fire. Daniel 7 and verse 22 talks about this beast power dominating the earth until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. God's saints, God's church, they're a major character, a major feature of what is happening here. This beast power attacks and exists to attack God's people. And then using that attack, God perfects his people. He builds character in his people. He helps bring to repentance those that have been rebelling against him. And It's much easier to repent, to change now. But for those that won't, that brutal attack is better than losing out on what God is offering mankind for all eternity. Verse 27 describes the inspiring future that these saints will be a part of. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole of heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. God is preparing people to rule the world and bring it to Utopia. Habakkuk 2 and verse 14 describes the result. The earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Now, this cruel king brings about terrible suffering, but he's the final European tyrant in history. And then after that, both Assyria and Israel will submit to God, and the entire world will be blessed through both of them. Let's read Isaiah 19 and verse 23. In that day there shall be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrian shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria, and the Egyptian shall serve with the Assyrians. And in that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Eternal of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt my people, and Assyria the work of my hands, and Israel mine inheritance. God working with Israel, God having Israel and promising blessings to Abraham. It's all about bringing all of mankind into this close relationship with him. And this is where you can see Isaiah and his dual prophecies. Some of his prophecies referred to things that happened anciently, but this didn't happen anciently. And there's a lot of prophecies in Isaiah like this that never happened anciently. The suffering that Isaiah talked about, some of that happened in type, but it was a type of what will happen shortly before all of these wonderful prophecies in Isaiah are fulfilled. And just as sure as the Bible's prophecies that have already been fulfilled in type anciently by people like the violent Antiochus Epiphanes, so there is a certain modern day fulfillment of this fierce leader in Germany. And just as sure as this leader's reign will begin soon, so too it's certain that we're about to see the reign of Jesus Christ. Conditions are ready for this man to emerge in Germany and Europe. We are already drawing very near to Jesus Christ's return, and the time when all war and conflict will stop for good. It's a time to urgently respond to this message, a time to prepare for this incredible event. And that's why we watch so closely for this strong leader to rise in Germany. That's why he comes up so much in our Week in Review episodes. His rise is a major event that will lead to the worst conflict in history. But the same Bible that accurately predicted Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, the Great False Church, the Holy Roman Empire and its 7 resurrections in Europe, the fierce king rising in Germany right now, it also prophesies that this will happen immediately before the wonderful return of Jesus Christ. So that, I hope, gives you some more detail about probably the most discussed prophecy that we have on this show. We'll have our regular Week in Review show where I'm sure we'll be talking more about this individual. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions for other topics to cover, please do get in touch, trumpetworld@thetrumpet.com, or leave a note in the comments. Please do like and subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. That helps us out enormously. Thank you very much as well to George Haddad for engineering and production. We'll be back on Friday. Until then, keep watching your world.